All right, so I'm talking with a guy about how to structure in more hamstring work for him throughout his training week. So basically what we've got right now with his current split is he has one lower body focused training session per week. So, and that's a very heavy day. And he has an A week and a B week. So the A weeks he is squatting, and on the B weeks he's deadlifting. So basically what we're going over right now is we're talking about doing a supplementary movement following that primary lift. So if it's a week and we're squatting, that supplementary movement should be, to steal from Swede Burns here, mechanically similar movement is what makes sense. So if we just come off a high bar back squat, maybe we move into front squat for 4 to 6 sets of 4 to 6 reps, because it's still very, very similar to the high bar. So how that might look on his B weeks is if he's doing conventional deadlifts, he hits his conventional deadlifts for a top single, and then we do some back offs where we can either do some back off sets that are conventional in nature, or we do some RDLs or something that is still working the posterior chain for more time under tension. So what him and I talked about earlier was basically adding in a second lower body session in his weeks. So adding in a second session, we just talked about him working hip extension every other week. So the easiest, quickest fix here is to work hip extension in some capacity every week, but that can be alternate between his heavy day and his lighter day. So he can have a lighter hip extension for more volume. He can also have a lighter lighter knee flexion to address the hamstrings as well. So his previous block, we were talking about doing deficit deadlifts, and he's been adding those in, but those have been taking him a long time to recover. So that addresses and tells us a lot of information about he has some weak hamstrings, weak glutes, and his back fatigues very, very quickly, his low back specifically. So we're going to keep that in there until that begins to plateau out. So, and the way we will know that is what happens to his recovery time. Does it go from 2 weeks down to 1 week, down to 5 days, and so on. So some other tools that we're going to use here for him. We're fortunate to have an inverse curl here. So that is basically an extended range Nordic leg curl. However, we can also add weight to that. So over time, it's a counterweight. So over time, we can take off weight and keep the volume held steady. So that's one thing we can do. He's adding in reverse hypers as well. So those are all things that will drive up his heavy hip extension day. So does that make sense? Do you have any questions on that? You want to see it laid out, anything?
I think it's, it makes sense, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of difficult as far as, like you say, the recovery time.
Yeah.
I did those deficit deadlift or RDLs.
Yep.
And I was still sore 8 days later.
Yeah.
When I met up with my next leg day.
Yep.
So it was like I kind of went lighter
Mm-hmm.
on that day, so I was able to still get some good volume in,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't as taxing.
Yeah.
But it took me a whole, 2.5 weeks turnaround to go heavy again.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's the big thing is, when we're looking at what's an appropriate exercise for you, is what exercise is going to require the biggest range of motion, where can we handle the most weight. So as an example, you can do split stance good mornings is going to make you use less load than a conventional RDL, as an example, just due to the mechanics of the lift. So then we can go about, okay, maybe we structure this in for 3-4 weeks to give you a bit of a break, to rotate out exercises, and then when we come back around, we're going to keep records of everything, and then our goal will be within the next mesocycle to break the record when we revisit that. So there's a million different ways you can spin it. There's not like a definite right nor a definite wrong way to do it. The idea is to get some volume in on knee flexion, but not just volume. We also want to push intensity with knee flexion. So don't always do, lying leg curls for 30 pounds for 100 reps. Maybe over time we do 75 pounds, but we break it up into sets of 5, sets of 10, things of that nature. So same thing goes for hip extension. But if we're going to go higher volume on the hip extension, we also have to be aware that that's going to fatigue you and that can affect subsequent training days. So if you have a long weekend coming up, who cares? You can beat the hell out of yourself, and then you have that full weekend to recover. But that's how I go about laying it out. Any more questions on that stuff?
Not really.
Okay.
It's just kind of hard when I don't have a distinct, hey, this is your program, this is everything you're doing on X day.
Yep.
It's kind of like I have my baseline work, so I know I'm going to hit, like on a leg day, I know I'm going to hit a squat or a dead. Whether that's front squat, back squat, doesn't matter. I know I'm going to have that, that movement, and then everything else falls kind of underneath that. But again, that's just like after I hit my squat or my heavy whatever, right? Now my complementary lifts, I'm like, I'll just throw this in today, I don't have it written in stone like I'm going to do XYZ exercise.
Okay. So with that, I would just say go through and lay out your next 3 months and start with a lower frequency, so that way you're not pissed off if you miss a session or whatever. It's okay. So that way you flip it and you look at it like, I'm going to guess low and say, or not guess, I'm going to structure low and say I'm going to do 3 training sessions per week. And then if you get an extra, great, that's a bonus. You'll feel good about it, as opposed to structuring in 6 days, and then if you don't make that 6, now, okay, the whole plan's fucked. So go through and actually lay stuff out. How I would look at it is going through the biggest ranges of motion in early mesocycles, and then as you get closer to wanting to retest, reevaluate, now we're going to be more of, you're going to pull from the floor in that final meso before peaking, right? So maybe in meso 1, we're going to do a deficit deadlift from a 10-inch platform. Meso 2, we're going to go from a 6-inch platform. Meso 3, we're going to go from the floor. So those are just a couple ways of like, hey, look at the range of motion, and then naturally the weight will uptick. So now how much volume do we do? We can look at, as long as it's north of a 6 out of 10 RPE or 60%, those are meaningful reps that matter, right? So you can hold the volume steady throughout 2, 3, 4 mesos and then see how you feel and just focus on trying to drive up the weight. And then you can focus on the next meso accumulating. I got this fucking guy outside my office. But doing meaningful reps that matter north of that 6 RPE. So on your heavier days, we're going to chase like a north of an 8 RPE. Some days are going to be good, some days are going to be bad, and some days are just going to be meh, and that's all right. As opposed to doing junk volume and stuff that's really not going to drive growth or adaptation that we're after. Like you look out here right now, and there's a bunch of guys doing fucking wrist curls and bicep curls and tricep press downs with not enough weight to matter. Their rest periods aren't short enough. Like all this stuff. So if you get more dialed, more focused on what matters and is going to drive the adaptation that you're specifically after. Cool?
Yep.
Any questions? Sick. If you guys have questions on anything, email me, Travis@dynamichp.net. Thanks.